Well, welcome Pensacon 2022 to day 3. Give it up for you guys. We have the amazing and talented Ernie Reyes Jr. here with us. Give it up for Ernie. Woo! So let's just dive in this. You come from an amazing martial arts family, and you've been competing professionally since 8, right? If I'm correct?
Yes. Yeah, my father is my original martial arts teacher. Grew up in martial arts. He had a martial arts school pretty much before I was born. So I came out kicking, I guess. Yeah, so you know, it was probably the late 70s. We would travel, compete, and then my dad also had a kind of famous demonstration team called the West Coast Demonstration Team at the time. And so we would travel all around the country almost every weekend, competing in tournaments and then also doing demonstrations. So yeah, I grew up in the martial arts, and my dad's still 75 years old, just turned 75 a couple of days ago. And,
all right.
You know, he continues to train, you know, every day and teach every day. So he's, you know, a real life martial arts is his way of life. So.
Yeah, because of the demonstration team, one of your debuts, I guess, to America, to the world, was the multiple dystrophy telethon, Jerry Lewis's telethon.
Yeah,
I just watched that recently. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. Little Ernie, you just rocked it, man. Just rocking it.
Yeah, it was cool. That was kind of before I got actually into films and television. You know, we did the Jerry Lewis telethon. That was actually, it's funny, I haven't thought about that in, I don't know, 40 years.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But yeah, that was awesome. You know, I was around all these other kind of kids and celebrities, people that I had seen kind of growing up, like just being a kid watching TV. And it was cool. We were raising money for a good cause, and you know, the Jerry Lewis telethon was a big deal.
Every Labor Day weekend for years.
Yeah, back in the day. I think it was in Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, that was a cool experience. A lot of fun.
But that's kind of like, I guess your big television debut let everyone know to them, because is that one of the things that led you to The Last Dragon?
Yeah, kind of. I was doing a martial arts demonstration in Las Vegas, and with my dad's demonstration team, and we did our thing, and everybody, you know, loved the demonstration. At the end of it, a lady, you know, came up to my dad and said, you know, my name's Sally, and I'm a longtime veteran in films and television, and my husband is executive at a television station in Los Angeles. And then she asked my dad, does he speak English? And he was like, yeah, Ernie, come over here. You know? And she basically said, you know, I'd be interested in, you know, managing your son and trying to get him into films and television. And it was kind of just a fateful day. We had always, I mean, Bruce Lee was my hero growing up as a kid. Absolutely. So, I mean, it was natural for me to kind of want to be in films and television, because my hero, that's what he did. Not only was he a great martial artist, but, you know, he was an action star. And so I always looked up to him, and even in our demonstrations, you know, I was always just kind of doing my version of being Bruce Lee, you know. And so she was very instrumental in making that happen. And I think actually the Jerry Lewis telethon, if I'm trying to remember, it was so long ago, I think that we had just signed on with her being our manager, and then she was the one who got onto the telethon. And then shortly after that, I did my first movie, which was The Last Dragon.
So tell us about your experiences on The Last Dragon. You might have seen Last Dragon. Isn't it amazing? Give it up.
Yeah. Yeah, Motown, Berry Gordy, you know, the guy that, you know, found, you know, the Jackson 5 and Diana Ross and the Supremes and on and on and on. Smokey Robinson. And yeah, they were making a martial arts movie. They were slowly kind of getting into film production. They were making a martial arts film about a guy named Bruce Leroy. And it was just kind of a fun, you know, offbeat, quirky martial arts film, kind of exploitation, you know. and they were almost finished with the film. There was probably about a couple weeks left. And they still had their kind of climactic fight scene that was coming up, like the end fight scene in the nightclub. And so they brought in my dad and I and my dad's demonstration team, and we basically flew from California to New York. And we got in, it was probably, I don't know, it was probably in the evening at some point. And so we went on to the set, and we were kind of basically just waiting around to do our demonstration. I was a kid, I was like asleep on the set, you know, and then my dad comes over and he's like, "We're about to do our demo, like, wake up," you know, like half asleep or whatever. And so we did our demonstration for Barry Gordy, and he loved it. You know, we had been traveling at that point for about 5 years solid, every weekend doing our demonstration. So we had a whole routine, you know, and we had music, and it was choreographed to music, and it was skits and comedy and action, and we had our whole thing kind of dialed in. And so they decided to, you know, write us into the script and make a little character for me, and that's how it all happened. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was the first movie, you know, and I grew up as you know, Bruce Lee being my idol. And so even though he had passed away, I think it was probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years prior to that movie, I still ended up in a movie with Bruce Lee. So
right.
I was like, yeah, he's not even here, and I'm in a movie. You know, because they had these flashbacks of, you know, Bruce Lee, and Bruce Leroy was obviously a huge fan, like everybody at that time. So yeah, it was an amazing experience.
And from there you went to Red Sonja?
There I went to Red Sonja, yeah, and that was awesome too. That was like one of my favorite like movie making experiences, you know. I looked like I was 6 years old, but I was 12. And you know, we filmed in Italy. It was Dino De Laurentiis, who was a kind of legendary film producer at that time. And I remember auditioning like 5 times at the Beverly Hills Hotel. He was like in a cabana. It was like old school Hollywood, you know. It was like the last of kind of old school Hollywood. So I would go over there and audition like 5 different times. And you know, my dad was always like, "We're going to show him the martial arts, even if it's not in the script or whatever. We're going to do it." So we always, you know, did our martial arts thing. And in the original script for Red Sonja, you know, my character, Prince Charm, didn't do martial arts or any action. But once he saw like what we could do, and you know, this choreography that my dad and I had, you know, already worked on, they kind of, you know, implemented that in. But yeah, it was one of my funnest movie making experiences. I was in Italy. Got to ride horses every single day for like, I was there for like 6 months. It was a great experience.
First trip to Europe, right?
Yeah, first trip to Europe, and I loved it. I thought I was Italian after about 3 weeks. And you know, when you're young, you just pick up stuff too, and you're not afraid, and like you're not embarrassed. You just start speaking, and yeah, it was. I could have basic conversations, you know. So that was fun. And you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I grew up. My dad was obviously into health and fitness, so I had seen Arnold in all the magazines. I had already actually watched the documentary Pumping Iron when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And then I saw the Conan movies, which I thought were awesome. You know, Arnold wasn't the big movie star that he ultimately went on to become.
Right.
But he was still like a star, and he was like larger than life. And so, you know, we would get to work out after work. You know, my dad had me lifting weights and doing all kinds of stuff when I was a kid. But we would work out, you know, after work, and I'd show Arnold my posing routines. You know, I got all your moves down. Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great time. And Richard Fleischer was the director. He was like kind of a legendary director. Directed like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and like crazy kind of old school legendary director. We had mechanical monsters, and the sets were all practical. It wasn't like CGI or Lord of the Rings or any of these things. They were like real castles that they built, like that you could run around, and like it was amazing. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
No wonder it was your favorite experience. I mean, particularly as a kid, you get to play on this this magical playground. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then one day, I love telling this story. Is one day we were coming home. We were finished work and we were wrapping. Arnold's mom had come to visit on set, and so we were just saying bye for the evening or whatever. We went into Arnold's room to say bye to his mom. I think might have been her last day there as well. And Arnold handed us a VHS tape, and he was like, "Hey, I just finished this movie. It's coming out in the summer. Take a watch or whatever." And so later that night, we got back to our hotel room, and obviously I pushed it into the VCR right away. I pressed play, and then up comes the title, Terminator. I was like, oh my God! It was like 6 months prior to it being released in the theaters, and we saw it for the first time on VHS. And I was like, I want to make movies like that, Dad. So yeah, it was a great experience.
But you've had your own adventure in the fantasy genre, from Red Sonja to you've been in both Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. A lot of people don't know that you were one of the turtles in the first one.
That's
we
right.
all know you as a pizza guy in the second one. But
Right.
tell us how you got into the Turtles.
Yeah, so they were making the film. Well, I'll kind of go back. So Pat Johnson, who was the stunt coordinator on the Ninja Turtle movies, at least the first two that I worked on, I'd known him since I was competing in martial arts. 8 years old. He was used to judge my forms competitions, and he was a fan of my dad's demonstration teams. And actually, prior to even getting into films and television, they had been filming The Karate Kid, which I think was like in 1983 or something like that. And he brought us in to do, like in martial arts tournaments, especially back in the 80s, what they would do is everybody would compete during the daytime, and then there would be a little bit of break before like the nighttime finals. So everybody who won their divisions during the day would come back at night and compete. So everybody who won first place in their divisions would come back at night, and then they would compete to see who would become grand champion. And in between the daytime and the nighttime finals, they would have demonstrations and things like that, and that's where we would do our demos. A lot of times we were competing at nighttime and doing a demo, and so Pat had suggested that they do that in the Karate Kid. So we were there on set, and it was literally at the All Valley Karate Tournament, like that set, and they were filming all day, and it was like a huge PR day. So there was tons of media on set that day, taking photos and doing that kind of thing. And they ran out of time, and so that was like my first kind of brush with Hollywood, where I was actually on set seeing. And so Pat came up to us and was like, "Yeah, sorry, we ran out of time." I didn't really care at the time. I was just excited to be like on a movie set, And so he called me back. It was So in between that, I had done a TV series called Sidekicks.
Right.
And Motown, it was a co-production between Motown and Disney. So after I did The Last Dragon, I went off to do Red Sonja, and I came back. Actually, a funny story I haven't really told before. So Motown was developing this TV series for me. We were off in Italy filming Red Sonja, and then it was like, hey, we've got this big Disney ABC meeting. You have to come back just for the day or whatever. And so, but the production was like, no, we can't have it go back to America or something. But it was too big of an opportunity, and my manager's like, we're going anyways, basically. And so I went back to California, had a meeting, it went great, then we flew back to Italy. They did end up finding out about it, and they kind of were like, you shouldn't have done that, and we told you not to do that. But anyways, so Disney and Motown produced the Disney Sunday night movie called The Last Electric Night, which was a pilot for the TV series Sidekicks. And that's how that came about. That was really developed by Motown and then produced by Disney. It was a co-production. So I don't know how I got into that. Oh, so Pat Johnson, called us up. They were making the Ninja Turtles. I was somewhat familiar with it because I have a younger brother and he was into the Ninja Turtles. So that Christmas, we were filming in the summer. That Christmas before we filmed the first Ninja Turtles, I had already bought, like my brother, some Ninja Turtle figures. So Pat called me up and was like, hey, we're making this movie. It's called Ninja Turtles, which I hadn't known about. And one of the guys got hurt in pre-production. All the stunt guys were from Hong Kong because the movie was produced by a company called Golden Harvest, which was responsible for all the Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li movies. So it was the first time that they were bringing Hong Kong stuntmen over to America to work on an American production. This is pre-Jackie Chan and Jet Li making movies over here. And so Pat Johnson called me up and were like, hey, we're looking for somebody of your size with your, ability, and the rest of the guys are all from Hong Kong. Do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, for sure. Because I had taken a break. That's how I got into it. So after Sidekicks, it was kind of like a little bit of a lull. I was around, I'd say, 14 when we were doing Sidekicks. Again, I was playing 10 years old. So there's a gap there, right, of probably 3 or 4 years where I hadn't done anything, And that's kind of a lot of how my career has gone. You do something and you disappear for like a handful of years, and then you do something and then you disappear for another handful of years, and then you do something and then you disappear for like 15 years. So Pat called me up, was like, yeah, do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, I'm in. It was just a stunt job, right, which was the first time that I'd ever done that. Normally I was the actor, but I did my own stunts, right? So this was just a purely kind of a stunt job. I was like, yeah, I'm all in for it. I was 17 I think at the time, in between my junior and senior year of high school. And so I was like, yeah, North Carolina, that sounds awesome. Jim Henson, awesome. Golden Harvest, awesome. It was just awesome all the way around. So I flew out to London and went to the Jim Henson workshop, and they molded me for a suit. Went over to Wilmington, North Carolina, and that's how I got that job. And then over the course of filming the first Ninja Turtles, I became friends with the Golden Harvest executives, and they really liked what I was doing. And again, I could speak English. That was always the thing. But can he speak English? It's like, what do you think? Asian people can't speak English? So, so they told me, we're going to write you into the sequel. At that time, I was like, yeah, it's cool if I could get a little fight scene or have a couple lines in it, it would be awesome, right? I had no idea, what that meant necessarily. And with Hollywood, you never kind of want to get your hopes up. Right? You're like, yeah, okay, that sounds good, just let me know. And so Ninja Turtles came out, it was this huge hit. Kids were being, found in the sewers. It was like turtle mania, man. It was going crazy. So they sent over, not too long after the movie came out, it was probably, I don't know, a few months, they sent over a script, to my agent. I didn't read it right away, I was like, I gotta go play basketball, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And then finally one day I was like, all right, let me open this thing up and check it out. And it was like, I opened the script, and it's like, and there was a little sticky note on top of the script, your character is Kino. Consider the role of Kino. That's how Hollywood talk, right? Consider the role of Kino. All right. So I open it up, and I'm like, the opening sequence in the mall, right? Did I mention I study martial arts? That whole thing. I'm like, wow, that's awesome,
Right.
And then I pretty much thought that was going to be the thing, but I was happy with just that, And then I started reading the script. Wait a minute, I'm in this whole movie. So yeah, it was pretty exciting. So we went back to Wilmington, North Carolina the following summer, which is really unheard of, to do a sequel just this next summer. You film one summer and then you're making the sequel.
Yeah, but even Turtles released in '90, and it was such a huge hit. It came out of nowhere. No one expecting how big it was. And so, that led to the stage show, and the cartoon was already running by then, but it was just so big. Of course, they had to put it in a sequel as fast as they could.
Yeah, it was basically as fast as they could do it, they were doing it, And yeah, it was amazing. And so we went to North Carolina, we were filming, there was a new April, you know, it was like a whole new thing, you know, going on. You know, the tone of the movie had kind of, you know, lightened up because they were getting so much flack from parents at the time. They were like, yeah, it's too violent, it's this and that.
Yeah.
So, which I love the original movie. I'm sure everybody does too. You can see though that it got lighter and a little bit more campy the second time around.
And added Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, which is always like the questionable part. It's cool, I guess. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, at the time it was like, yeah, they were doing everything they could possibly do to make it as commercial as possible. You know, whereas the first one, it was like truly an independent film.
Right.
You know, and New Line had only done really the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. It wasn't like they were a huge company. There was no Lord of the Rings. There was no any of that. They were just a new company trying to start up, which I loved. You know, by the way, it was like an independent film. You know, and it was like the biggest grossing independent film of its time at that point. You know, and so yeah, we went back North Carolina second summer. It was, you know, super cool. I wasn't in the costume. The first time it was like crazy. It was middle of summer, North Carolina is like 100 degrees out with 100% humidity. You're in these huge rubber latex costumes doing fight scenes for like 14 hours a day.
Yeah, I was going to ask about how difficult was it to, I mean, you're not, you came in this, you're not a stunt guy, you did your own stunts, but you're not, you know, something different for you. And then they're like, oh yeah, you have to wear this giant turtle suit, good luck.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was a lot of hard work, you know. But I was into it. You know, you can kind of tell, I always tell people, when you're making movies, when you're making something that's great, pretty much you know that it's great. You know, you can just kind of get a sense of like, wow, this is awesome. Just from looking at Jim Henson's designs, you're like, this is cool, right? I've also worked on a couple of things where it's like, you kind of know it's like not going to be the best thing. You know, you get an idea of that while you're making it. It's not like, oh, I think this thing is going to suck, and then it comes out, oh my God, it's so awesome. You know, it wasn't one of those. And so, yeah, it was a lot of hard work, but I was up for it. I was young. I was a teenager. I loved training every day. Like, it was a lot of tough work, but I'd still go to the gym after. People thought I was crazy, you know, at that point. I'd still go work out after like a full day's work, and I was just on my mission. And it was also an opportunity for me to be in front of the Golden Harvest people,
right?
You know, and my dad kind of always taught me that, like, you know, one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing. So, you know, make sure that you always keep your eye on the bigger picture. Sometimes you're doing something and you don't think that it's going to lead to the next thing, but you always got to be like on top of your game, you know. So I was just all in, you know. I was just trying to do my best and be in shape and, you know, all of that. So yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And then the second time around, the movie came out, and you know, they had the premiere at Universal City Walk, and it wasn't even like what it is now. It was like the beginning of Cineplexes, you know. It was like 18 theaters or whatever, and every theater was filled with Ninja Turtles, and it was this huge celebrity event. Like, Spielberg's kids are there, and it was like one of those things, you know. It was just like a crazy moment in time, and so it was a huge premiere, and it was awesome to sit in the movie theater. I was sitting in the movie theater, and the opening scene comes up, and the crowd is just like, kids are just going crazy, you know, with that opening sequence, and then the titles come up, and the kids were just cheering. It was a you know, a very memorable moment in my life. So yeah, it was super awesome, and it's cool to see after all these years, you know, people still having it hold like a special place in their you know, childhood, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know you've done a lot of other films, but before we get into all that, we're going to go into some audience questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
And so, look at all the hands go up, so we'll start with here.
Do you wish there was a Soul Ninjas 2?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess. It would be fun. I've thought about it, you know. And a lot of people online constantly ask me that, come on, there's gotta be a Surf Ninjas too, it's like.
With all the streaming services, come on, to make it easy, right?
Yeah, and I actually talked to Rob not too long ago about it, and so it's floating out there somewhere. I don't
Get
know.
on Twitter, just keep demanding it, it'll show up.
I mean, they're doing that so much nowadays, and so, I mean, all those characters seem like they're perfect to have continuation stories. Kino, Surf Ninjas, even the Electric Knight, so you never know how these things work out, you know what I'm saying? So it would be fun. I think there's a lot of fun directions you can go with something like that. So we'll see, you never know.
I got a question right here.
One, who's your favorite turtle? And two, if you could play any of the turtles, who would you want to be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to say Donatello.
Right.
He's the smartest one, anyways.
And both stats are cool.
Yeah, most stats are cool. I was happy. I was like, thank God I didn't get the size or something like that. Yeah, but the bow staff was cool, and I had actually the most experience with that weapon, like at that particular time, And so, I was happy to play Donatello, and I identify with him as well. So.
I'll get a question right there.
Do you have any funny-ass memories on the Surf Ninja set?
Yeah, the Surf Ninja set, so what happened was after Ninja Turtles 2 came out, it was like this huge hit, and I was basically like the human character, And I was the one that did martial arts, even though we had April and other characters, I was like kind of like a fifth turtle type thing, And I was on the front cover of the LA Times calendar section at that time, and so it was pretty cool. And so New Line, who had distributed those Ninja Turtle films, came to me on the Monday after Secret of the Ooze opened, and it opened to like a $25 million weekend, which at that time was like huge. If you could break, if you could break $20 million, like it was like a blockbuster. It's not like now it's like 200 million. It's like, but so they came to me and they said to my agents and managers, hey, we'd like to do something with him. And the cool thing is that a writer named Dan Gordon, who had written the pilot for Last Electric Knight, which was the pilot for Sidekicks, he wrote that. And so we thought, why don't we bring in Dan because he had written vehicles for me before, right? And so we brought in Dan, and Dan pitched 3 different movies for to New Line to see which one they wanted to do. One was Surf Ninjas. The other one was like me and Hulk Hogan, and there was a couple of different options of which way we could go. I think there was one even with me and Jackie Chan, which at that time Jackie hadn't even done any films in America yet. But obviously I knew who he was and was a huge fan. So Surf Ninjas, funny story. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a tough, it was tough because, Ninja Turtles 1 came out, it was like a huge success. Then they wrote me into the second film, huge success. Now they're putting me as the lead guy in the movie. It means it's good and bad. It's like, if it's super successful, you get to take the next step. If it doesn't do what they want it to do, it's all you. Right? So it's like, it was one of those things. And we knew that, obviously, and I was excited about doing that. And so, but you don't have the time, you don't have the money. It's really quick. Like we filmed the whole movie in like 6 weeks, which included us being in California at the beach and going to Thailand to film. So, there was a lot of, it was more just high pressure. It was like high pressure to perform, do well. There was a lot of trying to figure out what the tone was going to be, because a lot of the jokes that were originally was like, are we making a kid's movie? Or like, what movie are we making here, We're talking about swallowing the key every Tuesday. And which direction are we going? Are we going kids? Are we going You know, so there was a lot of trying to figure out. It was a little bit stressful, you know, but it was awesome. Working with Rob, you know, he had me cracking up all the time, like half the time to me being annoyed because I'm like, I'm trying to concentrate and be serious. This is being funny, you know. It was one of those things, but you know, I got to work with my dad. That was like the best part of it too, you know, because my dad had grown up with me on sets. We had started off with just in our karate school coming up with fight scenes, and like we did that every single day, you know. And now we had kind of like made it, you know. We're trying to figure it all out. So that was an awesome experience. But yeah, it was a tough shoot, you know. It was a hard shoot. Like different movies have different feelings, you know. And I was a producer on the film as well, so there was like just a lot of pressure to make sure you had a success, you know. And then when the movie came out, it's like nobody saw it when it came out, like in the theaters. It was like, I remember opening a Hollywood trade magazine on that Monday, and it was like, Surf Ninjas wipes out at the box office, you know. And it was like, well, I guess there goes my career, you know. And so what's cool about that is that when I started making appearances more recently, over the last, I'd say like 5 or 10 years, and all the people that came up to me were like, yeah, Ninja Turtles, but surf ninjas. You know, that was like a cool thing to experience, because it was like, it didn't do a lot of money at the box office, but like on home video, it was like awesome. Kids were renting it, and it's like multiple viewings too. So it wasn't the movie that you just watch one time and like, oh, that's cool. It was like, no, people were watching it like every single day. Even celebrities, like, you know, I work with Nick and Nate Diaz, and like, they're like, dude, you have no idea. I watch this movie every day for like a year straight. You know, it's like one of those, you know. So I'm glad that there's a lot of people that like love that movie. So
It's coming up on 30 years now.
yeah, I know, it's crazy. Don't make me feel old.
Question.
How long did it take to shoot that fight scene with Dwayne Johnson? And did you have to go in Portuguese?
Yeah. So what was cool about doing that was
The rundown, right?
Yeah, the rundown. Andy Chang, who was Jackie Chan's stunt double and part of the Jackie Chan stunt team for over 20 years, he was the second unit director and fight choreographer for the rundown, and you can kind of see it in the way that the movie was shot. The action sequences were awesome in that movie, and so yeah, we rehearsed for a few weeks. I think the actual shooting of it was probably around 10 days, which is a good amount of time. You know, the lead up to the fight scene, and then the scene afterwards. It's my favorite like action sequence that I've done like on film, and it was cool. Yeah, and then that was a role also that, you know, I was with my friend Arnold Chan. And he was like, hey, you know, it's, again, stunts, you know. So you kind of go through these things where it's like acting, stunts, and then at a certain point, you know, I hadn't worked really since Surf Ninjas. Like, people hadn't seen me. I'd done like some smaller independent films like Pool Hall Junkies. I don't know if anybody ever saw that. I had worked on small little things, but nothing that like a lot of people knew about. So a lot of people hadn't seen me since Surf Ninjas. There was like a 15-year in between Surf Ninjas and the rundown was about 15 years, you know. But I had never given up. It was like, okay, Surf Ninjas wipes out. I had to kind of reassess a little bit. And I'd been pretty much working since I was a kid. So a lot of that time was spent me just being a young guy in Hollywood, hanging out and like just living a normal life, you know. Also just trying to figure it out. And then I also got into acting classes and like was really trying to commit myself to being a great actor, which kind of wasn't my mindset before. It was just like, I'm trying to be an action star as long as I have a personality and whatever. Then once Ninja Turtles came and went, and was like, all right, well, maybe I need to like up my acting abilities and just try to reinvent myself a little bit. But 15 years went by, you know, and I was training like the whole time, you know, pretty much. Like multiple times a day, you know. It's like, so so my friend was like, hey, let's go visit Andy, and kind of, as stunt guys, you kind of hustle,
Right.
what they call hustling. You just go down to like the set and whatever, and like introduce yourself and hand them your stuff and just see like if you can get on the movie or whatever. And so they were like, and I was in shape, like I didn't get in shape for the movie, I was like in shape, ready to go. I hadn't done a fight scene for 15 years, so I was like, you know, ready to go. And so they were like, yeah, you know, let's see what you got or whatever, you know. It was like on the spot, like impromptu demonstration, you know. So I did my thing, and I just like brought as much energy as I possibly could, you know. And so then then Andy was like, hey, the director, you need to meet this guy. Because Andy had seen me training at a local college, you know, for a few years, you know, leading up to that point. And so he could see what I was doing, and like my skill had gotten better, you know, since Surf Ninjas. Like I kept progressing at that point. I mean, it was like kind of my peak athletic. I was a young guy, you know, and so it was like getting better, learning different stuff, and changing up my style. I competed in Muay Thai, kickboxing, like tried to just, you know, evolve as a martial artist. I was always doing martial arts, even outside of like films or television. I'm always trying to become the best martial artist I could be, you know. And so he brought over Peter, and he was like, dude, you know, they got the Kentucky Warriors, and this guy would be great to be like the leader of it. And Peter was like, okay, let's see what he's got. And I did my demo, and they basically were like, all right, that's great, you're the guy. You know, I was like, yeah, you know. And so they kind of just wrote in, you know, the character. There wasn't like, they knew that there was like a kind of leader of that group of people, but they didn't have the scenes yet written out and whatever. And so, yeah, we were there, and it was like, okay. And it was getting close to the time we were filming, like, where's the scenes, you know? And then I read the stuff, and it's like all in Portuguese, like lots of dialogue too. And I was like, well, you know that I'm not actually Portuguese, right? I'm not Brazilian, like for real. And so I ended up like last minute getting to meet with the dialect coach and just drilling the lines that I had and try to get it as the best I could in a short period of time. But yeah, it's one of the most proud performances, you know, that I had. I was getting able to act in a language that I don't speak, and like it was a lot of challenges to it, you know, just as an actor, you know. So I'm really proud of that movie. Working with Dwayne was awesome, and then he became, you know, one of the biggest stars on the planet. So it was always kind of a inspiration for me too, because, you know, I did that movie and it didn't, again, perform well at the box office. It did okay, but I think it somewhat underperformed what they had, you know, expected. And so it didn't necessarily lead to like the next thing for me. It was just like awesome, and a lot of people didn't even know it was me. You know, they didn't really make that connection of like, hey, that's like Kino from like. They're like, no, it's not. It's some Brazilian guy from the jungle. Yeah. So, but yeah, it kind of kept me motivated and inspired as I saw his career continue to take off, just to never give up. You know. And so yeah, it was a great movie to be part of.
Questions?
You talking about training with Nick and Nate and being from the area? Did you ever consider trying out Strike Force or UFC MMA?
Yeah, well, so I competed in Strike Force like about 4 times in Muay Thai kickboxing, but MMA wasn't even legal in California like when I was doing any of that. So MMA hadn't become MMA at the time that I was competing, you know? And at that time I was still like in my 30s, like early 30s, which is kind of like a later age to like pick up a new sport, you know what I'm saying? But I competed a handful of times in Strike Force, and Strike Force wasn't even doing MMA, it was like pure kickboxing at that time. And a couple of my fights played on ESPN as well. I know that I would have done that if the timing, you know, was right, but even when we were doing kickboxing, it wasn't like, there was no end result. There was like, you weren't gonna become rich, or it wasn't gonna lead to necessarily anything. It was just for the sake of competition and like becoming a better martial artist, you know? So I did that, and it changed my style. Like you can kind of see that from like Surf Ninjas to the Rundown. even though I was doing a lot of acrobatic stuff, there was a different level of like intensity, you know, that I had just through training, you know, Muay Thai. But yeah, you know, I'm a big fan of MMA. You know, at this point, that time for me is come and gone. You know, I'm not fighting anybody yet. So I got my own life challenges to fight against. So, but yeah, you know, as a martial artist, I'm always looking to evolve. For the last, I'd say, 7 years or 8 years now, I've gotten more into Filipino martial arts, Kali, specifically Sayak Kali, which is a weapons-based system. So most of the stuff that I'd grown up with training was all kind of empty hand martial arts, you know, Taekwondo, Muay Thai, you know, all of that stuff was all just empty hand. And I had done some Filipino martial arts, of course, just a little bit, learning little bits of techniques here and there, but not like fully getting into it. And so for the last 7 or 8 years, I've, you know, concentrated on more edge weapon based martial arts, and it's been great.
Questions?
What was it like to kick the rock in the chest?
Hey, any day that you get to beat the Rock's ass, yeah, that was awesome. I mean, the Rock's an awesome guy. Like, you know, I have a lot of respect for him because, you know, just from where he's come from, his personal story. You know, a lot of things like in Hollywood, it's about the story behind the story. You know, you see people as celebrities, you see people as movie stars, but you know, it's really about where they come from. You know, everyone knows his story about having $7 in his bank account and being kicked out onto the street with his mom and having no place to live, and to go from that to, you know, where he's become, you know, what he's become. You know, I have a lot of respect for that. But yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it was a great. It was, like I said, it's the best fight scene that I've had on film. You know, a lot of it has to do with me, David and Goliath type scenario, right? It's like I'm the small guy, he's the big guy, you know, and then I end up, you know, basically, you know, getting to. I'm like one of the only guys that could say that like they beat up the Rock on the screen. I kind of like that. But no, it's awesome, you know, and he's a down-to-earth guy, you know. He's, you know, from Hawaii, and, you know, I have a lot of family from Hawaii, you know, so it's cool to see somebody who's gotten to that level of success and who's still down to earth and just a good guy in general. So yeah, it was awesome.
We've got time for about one more question. So who wants our last question?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Well, listen, I just want to say thank you very much. You know, I'll just share some personal stuff. So about, I don't know, it was 6.5 years ago, I had kidney failure due to kind of like, you know, high blood pressure. You know, I never went to the doctor ever. You know, it's like, I never really broke any bones or anything like that. I was like training all the time. So, you know, for me, like going to the doctor is like, for what? Like, you know, you go to the doctor. Yeah, you go to the doctor for broken bones or things like that. Like, you know, you never like to check up on anything or whatever. And so, you know, about almost 6.5 years ago, you know, I was diagnosed with, you know, chronic kidney disease, and ended up on dialysis for 6.5 years. And 2 months ago, I had a kidney transplant. Wow. Yeah. And so, you know, it's, you think martial arts and you think about training and you think that it's, you know, you spend so much time, or I spend so much time thinking, you know, that it's about the, you know, mastering of techniques and fighting and all this other kind of physical stuff, until you get into like a life and death situation, like doing dialysis for 6.5 years or going through an organ transplant. And then you realize really the power and the essence of martial arts training is kind of in the mental and spiritual aspects of it. You know, when your back's against the wall, like what's going through your mind, you have the ability to control that, because it's really easy to go super negative super fast. You know, it's kind of like a rabbit hole. It's like, you know, a doctor comes in and they're like, you know what, we're putting a catheter in your chest and you're doing dialysis for the rest of your life until you get a kidney transplant. I'm like, I don't even know what dialysis is. Not only that, I've got something to do later on this afternoon. They're like, no, you don't, you know? And so, you know, I'm very grateful, you know what I mean? I'm grateful for my martial arts. I think about, you know, when I was recovering from my kidney transplant, healing up, I was thinking about all the people and events that had made a positive impact in my life. Because if life didn't happen exactly the way that it did, I wouldn't be here with you guys today.
Right.
So I'm very thankful. I'm thankful for my fans. I'm thankful for you guys coming out here and spending a little bit of time with me. It really means a lot for me to be able to kind of share my story. Because outside of films and television, the story really is just, for me, about, you know, never giving up and continuing to fight on, no matter what it is. Because we all have challenges in life, right? No matter what, anybody, I tell my kids too, it's like, life is going to be full of challenges. Like, that's the deal. You know, it's not, you know, even when you're having great times, there's most likely something that's happening that's not so great, you know? And so it's really just about never giving up, having a positive attitude, and, you know, continuing to fight the good fight. So I appreciate everybody coming out here today and spending a little time with me.
Well, we appreciate you coming to see us here in Pensacola. Give it up for Ernie Reyes Jr. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
All